Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Indie Pop on the New Age Insiders Network. We are the last mark standing. Damian Salty G and heel Trina herself, the Marky Smart. What up, Trina?
Hey, guys.
So we had a very interesting weekend of attending events. So we're gonna try to unpack and chronicle this as best we can. Last week we talked shindies, and this week we're gonna talk about fandom. And the importance of fandom and even being a super fan. And when I say super fan, I don't mean it as a derogatory statement because a lot of people have deemed it a derogatory statement, depending on what side of the fence you are on as a fan. But Trina, start us off with you went to AAW on Friday before making the pilgrimage all the way over to the Bronx, which in itself was funny. But you dealt with a couple of interesting situations while at AAW. So I want you to expound more on that.
Yeah, I mean, so if you're a longtime listener to Indie Pop or The Last Mark Standing, you know that AAW is one of my favorite promotions, and I try and go as much as I can. And so I had tickets to go on Friday, and I got offered last minute a front row seat. Like I was just going to go GA and sit in the back and whatever. But I got offered a front row seat from one of the fans, and so I went. I didn't realize until I got there that I was sitting with some of the most well-known rambunctious.
That's a great word to use, by the way. Rambunctious.
Yeah, I know. There's so many other words that I want to use, but just notoriously rambunctious group of guys. They stayed. The guy that I got my ticket from has a season ticket. He and his friends sit in the same spot every time, right in the front row, same spot. So the wrestlers know, like they know that corner of the crowd is where they're going to get horrible things said to them, and that's where they're going to fight with the crowd. And so the thing is, it's like it never occurred to me until like the actual show started, because I've been to AEW many times, and I've seen them, but I've seen them from afar. Like it wasn't, I just knew that they were like giving the guys a hard time or whatever. I couldn't really hear what they were saying. I just knew that they were rambunctious. And so the show starts, and I'm sitting in the middle of that. I'm like surrounded. And the guys all had they each had a bucket of beers, which is I think 6 beers, which they had finished. Each one had finished by the second match, and so it just started right away. It very quickly. I was like, this is what I'm in the middle of, and it was just a lot of craziness, because they also happened to be very much against a lot of the people that I routinely cheer for, and it just wasn't a fit. I don't want to say that these guys are like bad guys or whatever. Like our fan style, our fandom was just different. I'm crazy at shows too. If you've been to a show with me, like I react to everything. But I'm not necessarily that big on heckling people or like really getting under a wrestler's skin unless it's needed. Meaning like if the crowd is dead and I want to build some energy into the match, like that's pretty much the only time that I'll start like heckling a wrestler, like if it's necessary, if it's warranted. But like out of the blue, I'm not going to just tell somebody I hate them and like say weird stuff about their mom or whatever, like just to be a dick. So it was just wasn't a match. Like they had their agenda and like I had mine, and I think it was a weird show in that the booking was a little weird. There was no intermission. They started about like almost an hour late because the first match was a cage match. So everything was just kind of off. Like the overall, I would say, and you'll see reviews of the show, the matches were really good. The booking was just weird. The crowd was weird. The whole, because that was the same day as the inauguration, and tensions were high. I heard a couple of comments in the crowd that were misogynistic, a little sexist, because this is a show where Candice LeRae surprised Sami Callihan to challenge him for the championship, the AEW championship belt. And so intergender match, which you don't necessarily get that often at AEW or any of the the indies. So that happened, and people had some comments like she's a woman, she shouldn't be there, and all this different stuff. And so it was just kind of like a perfect storm of strange events all occurring all at once. That made it sort of an anomalous show for me. I mean, I love AEW, you guys know. Just wasn't an A+ night. They can't all be winners.
I mean, we've both been there where the shows on paper or we were just excited and then something just didn't ring right or didn't feel right.
Right.
And by all accounts, it seems as if just because you said something that really caught my attention, and you said agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Remember when I went to the Ring of Honor show back in August with Rick, and the Ring of Harambe stuff came out?
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking.
And that exactly goes to your point of people will go to a live wrestling event with agendas. And even the people with the most well-intentioned fandoms, like you and I do, or Rick does, or Matt does, it's all different. It's all subjective. Some people want to go to get liquored up and scream at the wrestlers. Yeah. Some people go because it's their first interaction with live human beings in their life. Some people go because they just love professional wrestling.
Right.
It's all different.
Yes, exactly.
When you openly see, the different agendas on display, that's interesting. Just in a overall encompassing thought process for me,
sociologically.
For me. Right. Yes, thank you. That's the word I was looking for. Sociological, like just no. It goes to everything that we talk about in Last Mark Standing, where 1 minute we're talking about socioeconomics, the next thing we're talking about portrayal of person versus character. So when you're at an indie show like this, and it's even more prevalent because it's a more intimate setting, it can leave you a little bit shaken and a little bit uncomfortable in your own skin, thinking, do I even belong here?
Yes.
Because we're all about inclusion. Last Mark Standing and Indie Pop is all about inclusion. And to be quite frank, it sounds like a situation that I don't think I would ever want to be in. To be honest, there's times where I avoid going to certain shows just because I just have a weird inkling. And in your case, you went, and now you don't know if going forward this type of environment would be a good fit for you.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was tough. In the heat of the moment, it really made me question whether maybe I have to take a break from AEW shows at 115 Bourbon Street, which is where that show was, which is most of the shows. I'm like, maybe like this just doesn't feel right anymore. Like it went from like the show that I went to before that was a huge like love fest, end of the year. Everybody's just like, Happy New Year. Like it was fantastic, and to come back and feel alienated was definitely very jarring, like you said. And so, just sometimes just be cognizant of it. I mean, look, I am going back to AEW next month, but they're in a new venue. They're trying to start a new promotion out in LaSalle, Illinois, which is outside of Chicago. So I'm going to go to that because the crowd there is from LaSalle, and which is a big wrestling town. Like they love wrestling, but because of that, they take a while to warm up to people they've never seen before. And so I'm taking it upon myself to go there to help support some of the guys who are great talents, and should be cheered and help them, get over with this very, very particularly picky, snobby crowd.
I was just going to ask you if they're wrestle snobs.
And they are, like it's so funny. You wouldn't think like in LaSalle, Illinois, but this is a crowd that they love wrestling. This is what I've heard from not just fans, but wrestlers, themselves. And that's why a promotion like AEW is going to run out of LaSalle, because, like they're all, that town is dedicated to it. Like everybody from like the taxi drivers to like the waitresses at the restaurant, like, if a wrestler walks in, like, they're like, oh, you're a wrestler, aren't you? Like they're like attuned to it, so this is the reason AEW is there. But there are a lot of like younger guys, new talents who are going to be debuting there. Because I had heard they had already done a LaSalle show last maybe a week ago, something like that. And I had heard rumblings that like a lot of the talent that usually goes over everywhere else was received with a tepid response quietly, and I was like, what's going on? And one of the announcers for AEW told me that LaSalle just takes a while for them to warm up to new talent. And so I was like, well, then by God, I'm going to go down to LaSalle or go up to LaSalle and help people out because, you know, I talked to some of the younger guys that I know. You know, there are guys here in the St. Louis area that are trying to get on that AAW roster. And so they'll be going to the show next week, just hoping that maybe there's a chance that they can wrestle. Like maybe if they show up, that like
It'll get them on the
Danny who runs, Danny who runs AAW will be like, hey, you know what? Like we need a run in. Like why don't you do this? You know, like this is how it works. Like guys will tag along, hoping that maybe they can get like a minute of exposure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like just even if it's to be security. You know, I know guys that have driven wrestlers to shows hoping that they could do something, and they ended up working security for the show. And so like that was, you know, to them that was enough.
You mean kayfabe because security or actual security?
Yeah.
Okay.
A little bit of both. You know, like just to have so they weren't with the crowd. You know, like they were clearly like a worker sort of thing. You know, like just to get their face out there and have them be familiar to the crowd, you know, like, so that's the thing. Like guys will like go and tag along, just so, you know, the people of the LaSalle, Illinois will know what their face looks, you know, like, oh, I've seen you before sort of thing. Like, oh, I know you work with AAW sort of thing. So, you know, like it's crazy.
But you brought up a very good point about exposure, and you mentioned young guys and young women getting themselves out there. And sometimes you got to attack the globe or attack the map in a sense where 1 minute you're working at AAW, the next minute you're at Battle Club Pro in the Bronx, you know, literally 12 hours later. And that's kind of what you did as you made the transition along with a lot of the Ohio guys.
Yeah.
All the way to the Bronx, New York, for Battle Club Pro in conjunction with Wrestle Lab. It was a very, I'm going to say this to start. It was a very interesting show, and I knew it was going to be interesting when we were waiting online to get into the building. You know, you, me, Tim, Rick, and Matt, and Hokai. There was a raccoon. A really fat raccoon, not a rat. A fat raccoon that walked past all of us online to the point where the raccoon looked at us as if he was going to say, what's up? And get online with us to go into Battle Club Pro. And if you didn't know you were going to the Bronx, that was a good indication. You got a fat raccoon, not even a rat. And the best part, Trina, is that there was a raccoon chant.
Yeah.
Raccoon, raccoon.
Yes, that was the best part. I mean, we were all in line waiting to get into the show, and you know, like someone spotted a raccoon, and people were like, "No," and then it just sauntered right in front of the whole line. You know, it didn't give an F. Like it wasn't trying to hide. Like this raccoon's clearly used to just like being out in the Bronx amongst people because it just like sauntered out in front of us. And yeah, I mean that elicited. It was easy. It elicited a raccoon chant. Like a raccoon doesn't just slowly like saunter by you and you don't give it a chance, especially in front of a bunch of wrestling fans. So
essentially it's like the Brock Lesnar of raccoons. It just came out, bounced around for a little bit, gave you a nod, and it's just like, all right, it's over, raccoon. Right.
Yeah, that was the raccoon show down. That like, so it was crazy. Yeah, and everybody was like, welcome to the Bronx. I was like, I didn't know this was a thing that you know you could see huge like fat ass raccoons in the Bronx.
That caught my attention, and the fact that you know we all met up, you know, as one big old happy wrestle fam actually made things for me, you know, with the social anxiety as well as our beverages of choice, which helped the situation.
Exactly.
That was cool, and then it was funny because we're online and you show up, and then I was like. You know, we make this comment all the time, and I'm not going to derail the podcast about how like when it's like in the desert and you see an oasis of water and you're thirsty, and I hate to use the term thirsty because it's kind of appropriate. Not even within 2 seconds of my homie getting online that someone's granddad, that's what I'll call them, started giving you their history lesson on the Bronx and volunteering to be your tour guide to the Bronx.
Yeah.
I found that to be uncomfortable. I found that to be just obnoxiously rude. And and we weren't going to talk about this, but the more I'm thinking about it, I was like, yeah, it's some asshole shit. Whenever my wrestle fam, you know, men, women, or children show up, we all are together. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
We include, we don't exclude, but we protect.
Mhm.
And that kind of put me in a, pardon the word, a salty mood.
Mhm.
And Rick was the same way, and Matt was the same way. We all were just like, all right, do we have to really like pound a dude like in the Bronx just because they're just being a dick?
Yeah.
Phil would love this when I'm saying this. Like, I was about to throw hands. Like,
Yeah.
that's how it felt. Like,
Right.
you
Right.
get protective of your crew, and then when they're being disrespected, it's like, all right, we gonna have to throw hands now, man. Like, we trying to enjoy a wrestling show.
Right.
But I digress. Then when we got in, my social anxiety kicks in because I was supposed to take a picture with Drew Galloway, and I immediately give it to our version of Ty Dillinger to take the picture.
Yeah.
Matty Nice, who has now been changed. His name
Yeah.
is now Matty Nice at Matty Nice 89 on Twitter. So follow him because there's a lot of stories with him this weekend.
Yes, for sure.
And him and Tim are taking pictures with Drew Galloway, and I got to admit it, man, I did not know Drew Galloway was this big. Like,
Oh yeah.
when you see him on WWE television when he was part of like 3MB, you think he's like slim and lean, but he's bulked up a little bit since he's hit the indie scene, and he's a lot taller than what you anticipate.
Right.
And when he walked past us, he's holding the WCPW World Championship, and even me just touching the belt on his shoulder, it was heavy. It was heavier than anticipated.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, Drew Galloway's huge. I've seen him at AAW, so I kind of like understand his size. Like I've stood next to him before, and I know he's a giant man. But I want to tell the guys, people listening to the show that like I think part of Damian's anxiety is that the place was super, super small. Like everybody was just like pushed up against each other. And so like when Drew Galloway walked out, like you're very aware that he's there because, like it's such a small room. If anything, I think that the room where the matches took place, where the actual wrestling took place, was smaller than the like dressing room, quote unquote dressing room.
Oh like, yeah, because you had to cut through the dressing room to get to the
bathroom. And I think that room was way bigger than the room that we were actually in, which is weird, like so that the wrestler's dressing room had like a lot more room than people actually, because the ring was just like right there. Not much room between. They did have a little area space between the seating and the ring, but there wasn't much. And then the seating really was like. There were no real rows. We were all just bunched up together. And, like Damian mentioned, the bathrooms were backstage. So you had to break kayfabe and walk through the wrestlers' dressing room to get to the bathroom. Like there was you couldn't just like sneak in. Like you're walking into dudes like getting dressed, like dudes working through moves and things like that, like to get to the bathroom. So, welcome to indie wrestling. But yeah, I think I just want to say like to let the listeners know, I think part of it, Drew Galloway is huge, one, but two, like this was a very, very compact space.
Yeah. But to be fair, when we all had to go to the bathroom, I felt so awkward cutting through kayfabe wise, like, oh no, gosh. I'm looking behind the curtain in Oz and I'm not supposed to be looking at this. And, and you, like you said, I'm watching these guys, guys like Caveman and MJF, discuss move backstage. And I'm like, I shouldn't be seeing this, just because sometimes I like to suspend the disbelief and having to cut through the bathroom, cut through the dressing room to get to the bathroom. I found that to be an interesting experience. And you see, like I said, it started off interesting.
Right.
And we're still at the beginning of the event here.
Yeah, we haven't even started the show yet.
Like we haven't even started the show yet. So we've had to take a bathroom break. We've had to be all up on top of each other. We've almost had to fight a raccoon. So, and that's before even getting into the building and getting into our seats. But once we were seated, our little band of misfit fam, as we are affectionately are.
Yeah.
We really, I hate to use the term we brought it.
Yeah.
But man, we really brought it, man, because there were some matches on the surface, on the surface deserved better. I'm not going to go through the card. And if you're curious, you can look it up yourself. Look up Battle Club Pro from this past Saturday and look up the results. And we'll touch on some things that we liked and thought that it was interesting. But the importance of fandom in a positive way was on display. when you had people, because I saw some people that I always see at House of Glory or at the Elks Lodge. There was like maybe five or six people I always see. But myself, Trina, Hokai, Tim, Matt, Rick, just sitting in the front row, we had more energy than 90% of the crowd that was there. And us, like 5-6 people in our little, our little group, we brought it. And and then a couple other people were there that we know. Big shout out to all those people. But y'all got to get on our level, man. I hate to sound like a cocky New Yorker, but you all got to get on our level because I don't know if it was, and we talked about this off air. I don't know if it was the unfamiliarity with some of the talent or just, like just to them. But for us, we were just like 2 kids or 5 kids eating candy all day. It was just great, watching Shane Strickland and Desmond Xavier tear the house down. When you and I are screaming and everyone else is screaming, and we're telling people to stand the F up and get motivated. And their match was the match of the night. All apologies to Rude Boy Riley and to Matt McIntosh and to Drew Galloway and Ohio is for Killers and all those guys. But those two, Shane Strickland and Desmond Xavier had the match of the night, and we were the loudest ones. It was almost as if everybody was sitting on their hands and knees.
Right. Like they were watching a funeral or something, a funeral procession. Like it's like they weren't even watching the same thing we were watching. It was crazy.
And I know it's so subjective, but I would love for anyone who's listening, and you can tweet us at Last Mark Podcast, myself at Dare to Be Damian, and Trina at the Marquis Mark, and let us know if you were in the crowd. Let us know why you feel that maybe that match wasn't your kind of thing. What was the reason? What was the reason for the lack of energy in the room? Because we have our own theories, but we want to hear from you. So tweet us and let us know if you were at Battle Club Pro during some of these matches. Why weren't the people as invested as maybe we were? Just putting it out there for the audience. But that match stood out just because it was 2 highly athletic guys who aren't spot monkeys. Let's stop. Like, I know some people are going to say, hey, they were spot machines, they were spot monkeys. No, they weren't. Okay. They worked a very, I want to say, thought out athletic encounter, considering that both of them probably worked like 8 hours beforehand. So maybe they were working hurt, maybe they were working, a little bit slower, but I enjoyed it. It was wrestling progression. It was progressive wrestling at its finest. And I'm just taken aback as to why so many people didn't really appreciate it.
Right. I mean, when Damian, sorry, when
that's
Damian
not the first time you've done that, by the way.
I know. At least I didn't say I didn't call him Desmond Alexander or something, which I've done.
Like you did that one time, yeah.
Oh God, that's terrible. Look, I think when Damian says that they look like maybe they had worked 12 hours before, which they did. Des was at AEW in Chicago the night before. It was a little bit of a slower pace. It's not Ricochet, Will Ospreay, but like take that down a couple of notches, and that's what this was. I mean, this talent level wise, they put on a show for real. Like these are 2 very talented people. They did have restrictions with the height of the ceiling, so maybe they couldn't jump off things the way that they typically jump off things. And the ropes are really slippery. I mean, there were a lot of different factors here that made it maybe like a tad bit slower than a match you'd see on TV or whatever. But in terms of what we saw, like talent wise, unbelievable. So maybe it wasn't like nonstop action, but these guys really put on a show, and it was very strange to see 2/3 of the crowd or maybe even more have no reaction to it. Because I think one example of all of this is now that that match is coming out in GIFs on the internet. Like Shane Strickland specifically is he's sharing a ton of GIFs from the match, just crazy spots, like all sorts, especially the ending. For sure, the ending was crazy, and so he's been sharing that stuff, and to watch it in GIF form and know that you were there. GIF, I don't know, whatever. GIF form, to have been there and know that like 90% of the crowd didn't pop for that stuff. is insane. You know, like if we can watch it in like little clips, like little video bites, and I can pop from like, you know, where I'm can keep back in Kansas City now, like to think that nobody in that crowd appreciated what they saw. You know, like it sucks a little bit. Like, and it makes me glad that I made the trek out to the Bronx to like let those two guys know, because that was actually my first time seeing Shane Strickland live. I've seen him on Lucha Underground. I've heard about him a lot. Like he wrestles a lot with a lot of the guys that I support. And so it's been a long time coming for me to actually see him live, but I finally got to see him live. And so I was super excited about it. You know, like I know what he's capable of. I've seen him on Lucha Underground. So I knew that like he and Des were going to put on an amazing show, and they definitely did. And so it was just super, super weird to look over to my right and just see a bunch of people who look like they were at a funeral.
Yeah. And I think we talked about this off air, how everyone just isn't familiar with some of the people that you and I may, or the shows may talk about. And I think that's why it's important, you know, for the hashtag wrestling fam, you know, to educate and to include and to pretty much just paint the picture for people. And I think that's why shows like Indie Pop are important, because I guarantee you a good chunk of our audience doesn't know who Shane Strickland is. I guarantee you,
really,
you know, not for nothing, the fact that people from Manhattan and New York listen to Indie Pop and they don't know anything about, you know, Dave Christ.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
That tells me enough right there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know Des works at Tier 1 here in Queens.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and Hokai, and for those that don't know, at Hokai 19 is like the New York king of the GIFs, you know, the wrestling king of GIFs. And if it wasn't for people like him, you know, you wouldn't know the type of talent we get to see here on the East Coast. You know, Trina's out over there in Kansas City, but, you know, me and everybody else, we get to see all these premier talents. And I felt proud to see the Ohio boys, you know, as they were dubbed, debut in the Bronx, because it's my first time seeing a lot of them. And I was so honored, because by doing this show, you know, and being, you know, you and I being friends, and our wrestling network, as it were, knows us and knows them, I felt like I was seeing a family member I've never seen, like a family reunion that I'd never seen before, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Long lost family. Like, oh yeah, I know who you are and you know who I am. And, you know, I appreciate the work that you do.
Yeah.
You know, and I think for me personally, I think education, and I wax on this a lot on both of our shows, educating people to understand and to maybe not even like, but just to understand points of view and to experience something different, you know, is what we're all about. I mean, prime example, myself going to Hood Slam, you know, in February.
I know.
You know, Emil's trying to get us to go to CZW, you know, and so that's another thing that I'm eventually going to go to, just to experience something different. So I think that's what you can do as a good Wrestle Fam friend, you know, to just introduce people to different types of styles, different types of wrestlers. Because I don't know a lot about CMLL, but Hokai's done a really good job of trying to get me to understand it. And I think that's where we can all help each other out, you know, like being together in one place, engaging in conversation. I was annoyed at one point. Do you remember the dude that told us to sit down because we were too into it?
Yeah.
You know, and last I checked, you and I weren't like 6'5".
Right.
So
exactly.
If you can't see over a 5'9", you know, and a 5'1" human being, that's your bad. You know, and he was tall himself, so he could have stood up, and he was like 2 rows behind us.
Right.
Like,
and which is that's exactly how I responded back to him. He's like, could you guys sit down? And I'm like, why don't you stand up? Like,
yeah, because the match is that awesome and we're standing up, but you're not.
Yeah.
That's your bad.
Yeah. Seriously. I mean, oh God, you know, like you have people sometimes, backseat fans or whatever, sometimes who'll yell at you for standing up during an entrance, you know, like, and I'm like, that's what you're supposed to do as a wrestling fan. Like, if you're in the front row and a wrestler's entering, you stand up, you know, like what a horrible feeling it would be if you were a wrestler and you're coming to the ring and everyone's just sitting there looking at you. No, like you want to slap hands with people. You want to like feel the love from the crowd, or you want to feel the hate from the crowd, like whatever. Like you fucking stand up. Sorry, New Age insiders, but that's wrestling etiquette. Like when there's an introduction, when someone's entering the ring, like you stand up and you show respect, like for the person that's about to put on a show for you.
Right.
So it's just like, yeah, I remember that guy. Like I mean, there were a lot of parts of it that I was annoyed with, but I just sort of tried to focus on
the good stuff. Yeah.
Supporting people on the good stuff. But yeah, like, I don't know. And at one point, I think I even said to you, I was like, oh, are we the asshole fans that we like deride all the time on the show? Like, like, are we the assholes, the jackasses right now? Like, which we probably were to that guy, like he might do a podcast and be like, these two jackasses in the front row, like wouldn't sit down and I couldn't see and whatever. And they were just being crazy. But my argument to him is like, look, we added to the show. And I know that at the end of the day, like the people that wrestled that show for, the 14, 15 hours they drove and how much they got paid, appreciated that some of their super fans came out to the Bronx and acted super crazy in the front row.
Right.
Like,
and
I don't know.
And with us, it's we're not the 6 beer tub guys you were talking about earlier, drinking like 6, beer buckets each. It was more those, we were more along the lines of, look, we like what we're watching. We're feeling something. We're feeling a response. So we're going with the natural response. It wasn't, we were trying to take over the show. A lot of what we were doing was just popping for awesome action.
Yes. Yeah.
So what's the difference between us doing that and let's say a kid? A kid seeing something for the first time, or move, and they're like, holy shit,
Right.
So that's what we did. We popped for a lot of stuff. We weren't standing up to boo, because when we were booing, like giving people a hard time, we were doing it from sitting down. So it wasn't like we were people's way.
Right. And even the heckling we were doing was still, again, like adding.
It's constructive. Yes.
Right. Exactly. Which you just, like you just have to be self-aware and like aware of what you can contribute and what you're doing to the show overall and to the crowd overall. And so, like, yeah, we were probably obnoxious to some people at that show. But again, like I said, I half of that card drove 15 hours to get there. And they're great wrestlers and they deserve more than silence. And so it's like, maybe we were annoying to you. Maybe we were too loud. We were too rambunctious, but, get on our level. So I don't know, dudes.
Step your game up, man. That's the best way we could put it. There was some funny and uncomfortable moments too, on the card. I don't know their names off the top of my head, but do you happen to remember the guys, the team that Dave and Jake were wrestling?
I think they're NV massage, like N, the letter N, the letter V massage. They're massage therapists is their gimmick, and I think it's is what their name is. Yeah,
they were amazing. I found their gimmick to be entertaining.
Yeah,
and all types of uncomfortable for the right reasons.
Yeah,
not like I'm offended, not in a way where I have to avert my eyes because this is offending my sensibilities.
Yeah. It's just something you haven't seen before.
Exactly. It was uncomfortable heeldom. And they kind of got cheers for doing the gimmick. They're like rubbing, you heard me screaming out from the crowd, oh, rub the trapeziuses, work the knots out of his lumbar spine. And the match itself was entertaining. The fact that they could work greased up and oiled up as much as they were in their white khaki pants or their skinny jeans, as I called it. I found it very entertaining. And one of the masseuses was a luchador. So that made it even better in my regard. Seeing a masked luchador pour oil as if he's some sort of dilapidated porn star.
Right.
I thought that was entertaining. That says a lot about my sensibilities, but that's neither here nor there.
That's the thing. Like, it's sad because I think, the complexities of that match were completely lost, I think, on some people. Because, to have a tag team do a masseuse gimmick and have oil and have these little parts of their their repertoire being like massaging people in the middle of a match, you know, like instead of doing a move, they would like massage your traps, you know, like, so like instead of kicking you in the face, they'd like massage your back or like get you in a position so they could like massage your arm or something, you know, like it was really, really fantastic character work. And the other part is that like OI4K, like Dave and Jay Chris were the perfect foils for this stuff, because if you listen to our show, you know, Jay Chris is trying to do a sort of like Prince thing gimmick, and you know, like Dave's just weird and he'll like totally be fine with you like giving you a massage in the middle of a match. Like, you know, like this was the perfect tag team match, I think, overall, like in terms of entertainment and quality and talent and just, you know, being entertained. And so I hope, you know, that the crowd enjoyed it as much as we did, because if you can ever see OI4K versus NV Massage, please, because it was fantastic. And, you know, like I highly encourage you to seek out both teams, because they'll definitely put on a show.
Definitely. And again, it goes back to what we're saying about just being entertaining in a very interesting, to use the buzzword from earlier, so to speak, way. And then we had something that we're going to talk about more on our show, but we're going to delve into this here on Indie Pop. There was an intergender match. I know on the indies that tends to happen. I personally have not seen one live before in my indie travels. So we had personal favorite of mine, Mr. Darius Carter, which is a cross between Stefan Urkel and Alberto Del Rio, gimmick-wise, going up against Jordan Grace, who I believe normally she works as a heel, but this time I guess she worked as a face. And there were times that I felt uncomfortable. And I didn't want to avert my eyes, but this was one of those like, oh, how do I feel about this? Because Darius was slapping the crap out of her.
Oh, yeah.
And especially in the turnbuckle spots, you know, like he was paintbrushing her, he was slapping her, and you could hear those slaps. And anyone who knows me knows how much I love and respect women's wrestling and women's athletics. But just part of me was just like, oh, and but let me correct people out there. If you're thinking I want to come to her rescue, no, I didn't want to go running in there for her rescue. She can take care of herself. You know what I mean? Like, she's a tough girl, but just the line was straddled. And I know it was to garner more heel heat for him.
Yeah. Especially once you saw the finish, for sure.
And it's just like, oh, what? Oh, you know, that during the booking, I would love to have heard them go over the match and her say, yeah, it's okay, slap me in the face as hard as you can. You know, because I would have done a double take hearing that, just as, let's say, a booker or as a promoter, and I'll clear it with you and be like, are you sure? You know, I'm sure Darius himself, you know, was thinking, are you positive? You know, because people have talked to him backstage, like he's a pretty stand-up guy. So even though he's like in character a lot of the time, I'm sure he had reservations, you know, slapping around Jordan Grace. But Trina, how did you feel as a woman watching that?
Okay. You know,
again, we'll delve into this deeper as a broader topic on Last Mark Standing, but I just want to.
Yeah, we will. Because you know, it's a pretty heavy subject. Intergender wrestling is not universally accepted at this point in wrestling fandom. You have people who it makes them uncomfortable and they refuse to watch it, and you have wrestlers who refuse to work it. You know, I know wrestlers who won't wrestle. I know male wrestlers who will not wrestle a woman. They just won't do it. You know, and so that's part of the reason some people don't even watch Lucha Underground, because Lucha Underground intergender wrestling is a huge part of their show. You know, you'll have a 30-minute main event where it's like tiny little sexy star versus giant like John Morrison, and they're in a cage and they'll go at it for like 30 minutes. Like, so I've seen people's discomfort with intergender wrestling. I've seen it firsthand. I've you know, and definitely on Saturday I felt that discomfort in person. You know, because they really worked hard. They both neither of them half-assed anything.
Nope.
During that match, you know, they both like gave it their all. And there were moments where I was like, you know, like this makes me feel uncomfortable. Like he could ease up, like, couldn't he, sort of thing. But, you know, that's my gut reaction because we're not used to seeing this stuff. But when I break it down in my head, when I think about it as a woman, and as a woman in wrestling who's trying to get ahead, I'm like, you know what? This is what has to happen for women to get on the men's level, you know, like for women to be paid as much as men, for women to be taken as seriously as men. We have to show that we can compete with men, you know? So it's like, as a woman, that's my argument, is that like, even though it's uncomfortable for me to watch, like Jordynne Grace is a hell of a competitor. Like she could kick a lot of people's asses, men or women. And I'm like, if she, you know, like she's a professional, he's a professional. And if they're able to put on that match safely, then like, this is what we need to go forward, you know, like to get women on the level that they need to be on, you know, like we need women like Jordynne Grace to go out there and like get slapped and make people uncomfortable. And, you know, like to show that like, we're not these wilting flowers, you know, that there are women out there who can compete on that level. And so you need to start looking at us as equal, because, you know, like female wrestling is great. Obviously, you know, Damian's a great, advocate of female wrestling. I love it too. You know, like I don't have anything against it. But to keep female wrestling, female versus female, doesn't do anything to put us on the same level as men. You know, like it doesn't do anything to get us the same pay. It doesn't do anything to show people that we have the same ability or same strength and things like that. And so you have to have these intergender matches to show that women are equal. Like it sucks, you know, like I think to somebody who like isn't a misogynist, I guess, like that's a foregone conclusion. Like, yeah, of course women are equal. Like, are they? Like until they're actually fighting men and winning and things like that. And so, you know, like the way that I look at it with stuff like this is sometimes change is uncomfortable. And sometimes progress is uncomfortable. And so it's totally natural and normal for me or Damian to feel a little weird about seeing Jordynne Grace get slapped that hard, like 5 times. You know, because that was the thing. It wasn't like, oh, he slapped her really hard. Like, you know, he fought this like he was fighting a man. You know, he did not let up. So it's like, if you slap somebody, you're not going to let up. And he didn't. And that's where like the discomfort level starts rising, because, you know, it's like, oh, just give her a break. Like, no, like as a woman, like, don't give her a break. Like, I want to see her compete at the highest level. Like, you know, I want him to use his entire repertoire, like give all he's got and have her still get up, you know, like, that's what we need, you know? So I say this all the time on our show at Last Mark Standing, you know, like, I know it feels uncomfortable, but this is what's needed, you know? And like, sometimes you just gotta watch it, like sit through it, or maybe, you know, look away or whatever, but don't poo-poo it, because this is the stuff that's going to get us on the level that we need to be.
And I would never poo-poo that. And you know me well enough to know I would never poo-poo that. And considering that she was the only woman on the card, if it gets you, like we said earlier in the show, if it gets you on the show, then you're going to do it, you know, and it, again, it's not like it was a valet being stomped out by a wrestler. This was a trained female wrestler going toe-to-toe with another trained wrestler. So I didn't, you know, I want to say and maybe this is my own stuff I have to work through, but I didn't see it at first. I saw it at first as 2 wrestlers going at it, you know, like 2 athletes. But then when it crossed that line or tap danced across that line, I kept thinking, crap, I'm seeing her not as an athlete. I have to check myself.
Right.
You know,
you're seeing her as a woman, a defenseless woman. Yeah.
No, not even defenseless. Just this ain't right. Part of me was like, this ain't right. But that I'm admittedly working through that stuff. So I'm not trying to sound misogynistic or knight in shining armor-esque,
right? Because
I am a huge advocate of women's wrestling. I just realized within myself there was a point of uncomfortability that I wasn't okay with within myself, but that's something I got to work through.
Right.
But
Which is fine. It's totally
yeah,
fine.
and that's what we want to do. We like, if there's a point where we hit where we're just like, I don't know about that. Don't run away from it. Explore it. Say
Talk it
why
out.
you, yeah, say why you don't feel, why you feel a certain way. Explain why you felt what you felt. And like us doing this now, I can work through it almost in a therapeutic sense, wink, wink, to be able to put this out there in the ether, so to speak.
Right. Or put it in context, or, like sort of
Yeah.
just work through the feelings, because, like whatever gut reaction you have to something is totally fine. Like, but it takes time and it takes practice to sort of change things that have been so ingrained and instilled in our like psyches, which inequality between men and women has been ingrained in our psyches, in our society, in our minds. And so, your gut reaction of going like, this ain't right, like, is totally fine and totally natural, because like I said, progress and change can be hard. So it's like, we have to change our way of thinking. Yeah. And it starts with stuff like this, like, yeah, like maybe your gut. Go ahead.
And don't get me wrong, the match itself was rather entertaining. Like, I don't want to lose sight of the actual match itself. The match was great. The finish was one I've seen a countless amount of times, where Darius has his foot under the bottom rope. Jordan picks up the win with a very impressive looking power bomb. And, Darius keeps the title because he's a schmarmy heel, bordering on Miz levels. And it was a good match. So I don't want my feelings to cloud the fact that this was a good match. So right. I'm taking my personal feelings out of what I saw and then refocused it back to where it belonged and the actual match. So it goes to what you were saying about talking it out and owning what you felt, but still keeping in context what exactly we watched. And it was pretty damn good wrestling.
Exactly. Because over time, like if you keep seeing, that's the thing that's been with me and Candice LeRae, for example. I've seen so many of her matches at this point that I know that she can hang with anybody in the ring. Taya Valkyrie is the same way, Sexy Star. Like, you just have to keep watching these matches and watching these women compete, and you'll get over it. You know what I mean? That's actually my first time seeing Jordynne Grace, but she is an amazing athlete. Just at the beginning, you could tell like she could hang, and so it's just like, sometimes you have to recondition your brain, and take that gut feeling and be like, use your brain and be like, you know what? Like, she's a professional. She's a great athlete. Like, she can handle herself, and over time, your gut feeling changes into like, oh, that's a tough woman in there. Like, I'm watching two equals go toe to toe.
Right. And it goes back to what I said before about this was my first time seeing an intergender match live. So as I continue, like you said, as I continue to see it, I will grow more accustomed to it and look at it as, okay, it's just two wrestlers. So no big deal.
Right. Right. Exactly.
So before we get out of here, I want to harken on one funny thing. And you know where I'm going to go with this. So New Age Insiders, just bear with me on this one. A couple of weeks ago, or maybe like a month and a half ago, Rick Castle and myself decided to indoctrinate our friend formerly known as Matty Ice, now known as Matty Nice, because he's a very kind and very genuinely good human being. Like, when I tell you Matt is one of the nicest guys I have ever come in contact with in my life. He really is. Nothing shakes him, nothing phases him. He's a roll with the punches kind of guy. And he loves coming to indie shows now. His first show was when we took him to BCW and the ring didn't show up, for the first hour and a half. Then he went with us to the New York Sportatorium, last 2 weeks ago, and saw his first quote unquote shindy, and he still had a blast to the point where he brought his brother, And now he's been fully welcomed into this crazy, ridiculous family, because at Battle Club Pro, Dave Christ actually decided to Matt took a chop. Let's just be real here.
Yeah,
because,
you're right.
Let me not even build it up anymore. Matt took a chop from a professionally trained wrestler.
Yeah.
Not once, but twice. And Dave did not pull his chop like
Nope, not at all. No.
at all. Like we've seen chops live in person, and you know,
Hmm.
you've been chopped, you know, by
Yeah.
a wrestler, and he didn't pull it.
Nope.
So Matt took it like a champ
Oh my
twice.
goodness.
And I give him so much credit in the world. And
Hmm.
he said, you know what? When we went back, and you know, we went back to the, you know, where we were all hanging out, and like we were telling the story to people. What
Hmm.
his girlfriend's first reaction was, "Why did you let that man chop you like that?" You know, and then that's like, because it was fun.
Yeah, right.
And that, you see that right there, when he
Mhm.
says, "Because it was fun,"
Right.
made me
Exactly.
so happy.
Oh
It
yeah.
it made me so ecstatic to know that, okay, he gets it.
Hmm.
You know, he
Oh
wasn't
yeah.
he wasn't an asshole about it. He took it. He smiled. He laughed.
Yeah.
You know, and that was great for me as a fan, and as his friend, and as
Hmm.
someone who has introduced him to independent wrestling, which he now has an appreciation for.
Hmm.
And thusly, he's actually made us all closer. You know, myself,
Hmm.
Ricky, and him.
Hmm.
I can't see myself traveling without my rat pack, in a sense. You know,
Right. Right.
he just ran with the punches.
Yeah.
And it's fans like that that I appreciate. So at Matty Nice 89, you know,
Hmm.
he's our version of Ty Dillinger. And if you've seen the promos I've cut on my Twitter page at Dare to be Damian, when he lets his hair down, he looks like a very Seth Rollins-esque.
Right. Exactly. He's a hybrid. He's like a Ty
Yes,
Dillinger, Seth Rollins hybrid.
exactly. And
Yeah.
and he's the kind of wrestling fan you want to bring to shows, who don't understand but
Hmm.
wants to understand. And when they're there, they are having the time of their
Right.
life.
Right. I think and I can attest to this as well because I was there on Saturday. I think the lesson of the story is don't be afraid to introduce people to wrestling because
Mhm.
what Damien and Ricky have done, taking Maddie to these shows, I mean, it's so amazing to see such like a pure a pure mark. Like he is such a fan. And to see like a grown man just like really mark out at wrestling, like everything is cool to him.
Mhm.
And it just brings you back to why you like this thing in the first place. You know, like it was just awesome to see. To go to a show with someone like him who that's only his third show that he's ever been to.
Yep.
And everything is literally amazing to him. It's just like, yeah, this is why I like this, and don't be afraid to introduce people to it because yeah, you're not going to get Matty Nices all the time. Some people might be like, oh, this is dumb or whatever, but you might be surprised. Take the chance to create a new fan because now that Matty's all about it, like I wouldn't have it any other way. Like the
Right.
world is a better place now that Matty Nice loves indie wrestling.
Exactly. And now that he has been welcomed into the family, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things where I'm proud to say I was one of the people that helped convert him
Oh yeah.
to love wrestling. You know,
Yes.
I can take credit for that. And me doing shows like, Last Mark and Indie Pop,
Mm-hmm.
people will appreciate what you show them when it comes from a place of pure joy and passion.
Yes.
They
Mm-hmm.
may not love it like you love it, but they can appreciate your passion for it. And this is an example of enjoyable passion, to the point where now his girlfriend wants to go to a show to
Yeah.
experience what he experienced, just to see, like, why is it that my boyfriend comes back so excited,
Right.
you know, from watching these shows. And it's
And
the
getting
same,
slapped.
and getting chopped. And what people don't know is that I also, in between Dave Chris chopping Matt, I chopped
Mhm.
Matt. And he actually did say my chop really did hurt, because if you go back and listen to my chopping of him,
Mhm.
when he showed us his chest back at the house, my
Mhm.
palm print is on his chest.
Right. Exactly.
So I
Because
have
Dave,
heavy
Dave was
hands
doing it
myself.
safe, and you were
I
just
was doing it.
slapping.
I was doing Big Show Kali style,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
brakati. But I will never do that again to someone that isn't my friend. So
Right.
yeah.
Exactly.
So thank you,
And
Dave Chris, for doing that. That was
yes.
awesome on your part.
Let's add that I also slapped him and totally missed the mark and pretty much just like knocked the wind out of him by slapping him in the sternum.
Yeah, you
So
basically caved his sternum in, and
yeah, don't
it,
let me slap you.
no, that's the moral of the story is only let professional wrestlers chop you. Don't
Yeah.
let don't let us chop you,
Yes. Yes. That is
because that will
totally the
not end
moral of the
well.
story.
That will
Yeah.
not
They
end
know what
well.
they're doing. We do not.
Before we go, also, big shout out to Tim for taking the trip up. We met Tim. Tim's a friend of the New Age Insiders,
Mhm.
and rant
Huge
with
fan
him.
of the Ohio boys.
Yeah, and it was great to meet a fan and not say he was, I'm not going to say, like, oh, like I don't like meeting fans, but it was an enjoyable experience to sit with a fan and I didn't have to like walk them through anything. Like they just got it,
Right.
and the energy was infectious. And he was one of the people also that really sold this show for us and for anyone in attendance who saw us there, who doesn't think we're assholes, or maybe you think we're assholes. Again, that's okay.
Right.
But those are the kinds of fans you want to be around because they're respectful of what's going on. They appreciate the athleticism and the work rate. And to be quite honest with you, that's what makes the show better.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Again, because it goes down to true passion and love and joy for the sport. Like he has it. And everybody from the other fans sitting next to him to the wrestlers know that, like they see it. Like there's no questioning it. So like, if you see us interacting on Twitter or whatever, or see him at a show or if another fan like that, like there's no one out there that begrudges a fan like that. Right. I can tell you that for a fact. Like everyone that he came out to see, he came from New Hampshire, by the way. So he drove and then took a train to New York to come see the show because he supports the guys out of Dayton so much that he did all of that travel just to come and see them. And they love him for it. Like I can tell you for a fact that the wrestlers appreciate fans like Tim, and they appreciate Tim for sure, because they know the effort and the passion and love that he puts into the sport and into liking them as wrestlers. And it's not, I don't know. Maybe, I just feel like maybe on paper or whatever, it can like look a little weird or whatever. Like to look like a super fan sometimes is a negative. But what I'm trying to say is that when it's coming from a good place, like when you just genuinely like wrestling and you like that wrestler and you do all these crazy things to go and see them and cheer them on, like nothing about that is bad. Like everything about it is good and it makes everybody around you and everybody involved happy.
Right. And to be quite frank with you, and this was one of the happiest events, for me. Like
we got Hokai to smile.
Yes, because he never smiles. He's always very stern and serious, because he's the Don of the GIF game. So
yes,
he actually smiled and laughed. And here's the best part, folks. I got my last Mark Standing hat finally after all this time. So Hokai's got one now. I got one. Rick's got one. So it's good. And we got to see Drew Galloway in the main event, and against Anthony Bowens, and it was a pretty it was a paint by numbers main event. But the one part I didn't like was when they went brawling into the crowd, and then they said, "Hey, you have to watch on YouTube to find out what the fight looked like, so to speak, backstage in the quote unquote dressing room." Before we go, one last shout out to David Adams, the ring announcer. He was an unsung hero. He inspired Trina to do better for her Glory Pro event. Her debut on February 19th, later next month. David Adams, he works House of Glory. He's amazing. I feel everything's a big fight for him. He's like the Bruce Buffer of the independent wrestling scene. And this is no disrespect to Emil. It's just they're different. It's not that
it's a different style.
This is a different style. And to be quite honest with you, like I felt it in my feet, the power, to borrow a line from Big E, I felt the power in my feet. But big shout out to David Adams also for making the event a bigger deal than probably anyone would have ever assumed it would have been.
Right. Exactly. He was awesome to see him live and to see, do what he does so well was an honor for me. So I loved it.
And it was motivational for you too, because now you're like,
sure.
I don't know if I could do that,
Yeah, well, I mean, when you see somebody that's so good at what they do, like where it's like even next level, it's like he was born to do it, then it really inspires you to try harder, and so I'm like, if there are guys out there like him that are doing House of Glory or Battle Club Pro or whatever, like that's the kind of impact I could make possibly, and that just makes me want to do much better. Like if I have the chance to go and like take a show like Battle Club Pro and make it so much better just by ring announcing, like that's amazing.
Well, fingers and toes crossed for you, Trina, because on February 19th, you got a lot to got a lot to look forward to, and I will gladly interview you for Indie Pop as well as Last Mark Standing, because you actually are working in the wrestling business now. So
I know, I'm a
you're you're
worker. Ah.
you're a worker. You're working the show, so I'm looking forward to that. And thanks again to New Age Insiders for letting the letting the Last Mark Standing basically, just blurt out stuff about independent wrestling and letting us just gurgle all over the place. Because I know
Yeah, yeah.
sometimes we're a little frantic, but we mean well, and we're very passionate about this. So thank you to New Age Insiders. Thank you to anyone who supports Last Mark Standing. Myself at Dare to be Damian Salty G,
Mhm.
Theo Trina herself at the Marky Smark, our show at Last Mark Podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud, respectively. We love you guys. This is why we do it. And we'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.